I have these friends, Dan and Sheila. They're podcast hosts.
Welcome to Profiling Criminal Minds. I'm Dan.
And I'm Dr. Redmond.
And we are back to watching a random TV show, although this time it's kind of for a good reason, in that it is based on one of my favorite things ever.
The Yakuza video games.
The Yakuza video games. Now, It is not an exaggeration to say that this is my favorite series of video games ever. And as a consequence, when I started watching this, there had been an adaptation back in the mid to late 2000s when I'm trying to decide, how do you describe Takashi Miike? Extreme cinema auteur Takashi Miike had been hired to do an adaptation of it. And he didn't take it at all seriously, and he didn't care about the source material or think it had a particularly good story. And so he utterly botched the job. It's a terrible movie. It has nothing of what you want the series to have, although it does one or two things a little better, which we'll talk about later. And so when I found out that, and I'd always said, well, you know, there is no video game series that is easier to adapt than the Yakuza series. Like it literally, it's already every game is already a perfectly structured story to be a season of television. So you literally couldn't have an easier time than adapting Yakuza into a TV show. And if only that's what they'd done. But you know what? This is why I was so desperate to talk to you about this, because I'm completely incapable of separating, my passion for the source material from what I watched and my reaction to it as an adaptation. But you have zero familiarity with the source material, correct?
Well, technically, I have zero. I have watched, because you've played.
You've seen me play them. Yeah, you've seen me play little bits of them. But I never. Exactly. You've never been paying attention to the story or the characters or anything like that.
I did see some of the story, but the problem is it's a video game. It's in Japanese. I have to watch the subtitles, so I have to sit in front of the computer.
Which you're not going to do.
Because I'm not going to do, but I know that it's there.
You're aware of it from a background context.
Yes, and, so it's Yakuza. Now, so I guess I'm going to be the one that's going to comment on
Yes.
Do I think it works?
Well, that's what I need to know.
Yes, I
do.
Okay. Now, here's the thing. It's the same thing, but I did this with Halo.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't, and so we're doing basically a Halo, but I did it with my grandson. So
yes,
we're doing a Yakuza, the same thing.
It is the same kind of thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I understood after I talked with him for about 2 hours or 2.5 hours.
Why he was so disappointed by the adaptation.
Why people and other people were, because he explains the differences. And I could see what the guys who adapted Halo were trying to do, but I think that no, they strayed too far from the storyline as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if this strays too far from the storyline. You'll have to explain that as we go along.
I will explain it.
Okay, now, but as a story in its own right, as I said, I started watching it, and I said it starts off the first couple of episodes. It's like, my line was, it's like, oh, this is Goodfellas meets Vincenzo.
It's definitely working in that field. Yes.
Yeah. So because you have got, whatever, what's his name? Kazuma Kiryu and Nishiki and all of these other people. But it's Kazuma Kiryu. He opens it up with just like Goodfellas does, where he said, I had always wanted to be the dragon, right?
Yeah.
Of whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So he, and he's talking about this, and now we're going to get the story of that.
Yeah.
Turns out that he and his friends, but you see all of this, pulling a heist.
Yeah.
And they did a really good job of pulling the heist, I'll tell you.
It's a solid heist.
It was just great. It was a solid heist plan. The problem is they ran afoul of the Yakuza.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's how I started it off. And then as it got darker and darker and darker,
yeah,
as you're getting more and more of the backstories of these adults, young adults who are all orphans, and you're getting some of the backstory, and it's very Japanese. But it's at times, because they're flashing mostly between 95 and 2005.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's this 10-year. It takes place in 2005, and they flash back to as Yakumi, our hero, is getting
Kazuma
out of prison.
As he's getting out of prison.
As he's getting out of prison. Kazuma
with a K.
Kazuma.
Yeah.
Okay, Kazuma. Let's just call him Kazuma.
Exactly.
Nishiki was easier to remember.
That is.
And Yuma.
Yumi really easy to remember, yeah.
And Aiko, everything else. His name, Yakuza.
Kazuma Kiryu is a little harder because there's also a guy
Kiryu
named Kazama who's his dad.
Yeah.
So it is needlessly confusing. To the fact that
but of course, in this case, it's not his dad. He is the guy that runs the orphanage and has taken all these children in.
Exactly.
Okay, and he has taken a lot of children into the orphanage.
Yes.
Very quickly, we find out, first episode, that the man who is running this orphanage was once in the Yakuza.
Yeah.
And had got out.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's explanations. That in itself, if you know nothing about the Yakuza, is a little strange. But
yeah, I know the idea that you're just leaving.
That he could get out, but he did. Everybody accepts that he was the exception to the rule.
Yeah.
But when you get the last shot of the first season,
yeah,
all right, because we're going to get the next season and the next season, I hope.
Yes.
From my perspective, I want to see how they're going to handle the next season. What's going to happen there? Now having watched bits and pieces of the movies, I can understand something. And the big twist, the big twist comes right in the last shot of the 6 episodes, the big twist, but I'd already figured that part of it out.
Yeah.
Earlier.
Right.
Okay. Because I understand guilt. So, I didn't know what the guilt was related to, what bad thing he had done. We don't find that out until the very last episode, in the last probably 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So, but as far as I'm concerned, once I got used to, it takes a while. There are a few people that is a little confusing. Particularly, there are 3 Yakuza clans.
Yes.
Basically.
Well, there's yes.
Outlaw. There's the one that have been kicked out, but there's 2 main clans.
Yes.
But there's also, it looks like there are 3, the equivalent of the Dons.
Yes.
That one stays way in the background.
And this is something that the show doesn't really explain. The idea is that the Tojo clan is a mafia organization made up of 30,000 people, all of whom are independent families.
Yes.
And they run Tokyo. Now, over in another city is the Omi Alliance, who is a similarly sized organization. And it's Omi Alliance money that has been stolen, and it's Omi Alliance that they're going to be having a gang war with if the money isn't discovered.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
but it does not clearly,
and
you mostly don't see the Omi Alliance people. We only see them briefly.
No.
But
and off.
Exactly, on and off. Mostly we're hanging out with Tojo clan people, and that it can be a little confusing what the ranking and who's in charge.
Yeah. And that is specifically, and I'm sure for people who are Japanese, this is much it's simpler. Not explained for people who don't
already know this
now
stuff.
Because I read stuff about the Chinese
their moms.
gangs, right? I've read a lot about the Chinese.
There's enough similarities that you were able to follow a lot of things.
In terms of the clans coming together. I will just call them clans.
That's fine.
And
they use the word family, but it's the same thing.
But it's the same thing. They use the word family, right? And so what happens is that, you have the same sort of thing in this, like uncle. These are terms that they use, not in Japan, but here.
You're right. They use
father.
uncle. They use father and they use brother.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a family has a patriarch rather than an uncle, as they do in China.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you're right. That is the major difference. But it's very similar organizational systems. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So it's
there's just
not
a lot of more
confusing.
ceremony in the Yakuza.
Oh my God, is there ceremony? But the thing is you have what is the name of his subclan?
The
one
Dojima.
that starts with the D.
Yeah, Dojima.
The Dojima.
Yeah, led by Mr. Dojima.
Yes, Mr. Dojima leads
who is
his
the guy
own Yakuza.
that Akira kills. The guy that Akira kills is the head of the Dojima family, and he's actually, it's not a coincidental name. He is Sohei Dojima, and it's his clan, and that is who he kills.
When?
That's why Kazuma Kiryu went to jail.
In 7.
Yeah. No, why he went to jail.
Oh, in 1995.
Yeah, in 1985.
Okay, yes, but we don't find that out until
not for
episode
ages.
6.
No. Exactly.
Or 5. Episode 5.
Okay,
that's why I'm confused, okay?
No, absolutely. I get it. But yeah,
I know who it is.
I just want to make sure we were all clear that's Mr. Sohei Dojima.
Hishiki. No,
yeah,
Nishiki.
Nishiki is, that's who he kills.
Is the one who he kills.
Yeah, that's who he kills.
And finding out that whole story, that was look, the acting was, the yelling and the screaming and everything else is over the top, but that's typical. Oh, yeah. You find that in the Japanese, the Chinese.
That's their stylistic acting choices. Yeah.
Yes, and I constantly am going with. I keep thinking about God of Gamblers.
That was wonderful. Yeah.
The Chinese. I thought some of their fight scenes could have been better lit. There's all sorts of.
That's a real issue things. In the series. The lighting.
Oh,
of the fight
it is
scenes.
bad, but it is bad in the video game, except that it's. Because it's not real in the video game.
Yeah.
Right? Like things are very dark. And I think they were trying. This much I do remember from the bits and pieces that I've watched.
Yeah.
Is that it is dark, but because it is animated as opposed to real life.
Yeah. That was a function of and to be fair, that was a function of the PS2 version original.
At the time, yeah.
The remakes look much better. Like there's no comparison.
But it doesn't matter.
Oh no.
It's that when you try and recreate that darkness.
Yes.
In real life.
It ends up looking very strange.
It was difficult at times to see. Now, having seen so many either South Korean, and because there are some similarities, and then because you haven't seen as much South Korean as I have.
No, I have not.
And then the Chinese stuff that we've all watched, the Hong Kong Chinese stuff that we've all watched. No, not the stuff that Jackie Chan did.
No. All of the crime dramas that were so popular in the 90s.
Last night I was talking. I said I have to go home and finish watching this Japanese thing. Yeah. And we were talking about Hong Kong. I said, and pirate a copy. She says, yeah, the ones with the Chinese across it and then the English and you can barely see it. I said, yep.
Because it was a legal requirement. A legal requirement in Hong Kong that everything had to have English subtitles. But nobody really cared that much about the English subtitles. They just legally had to be there. And so they were pretty bad subtitles.
They were terrible,
They really were. Yeah.
But anyway, to get back to this, as a whole, I thought the story was paced well. Once I got used to this idea, and then of course they do go back to 85 once in a while.
Yeah.
It's at the beginning.
A not insignificant amount of the story. They bop back to what was going on in 1985 to set up what's happening now.
Yeah, and I mean that scene, like at the beginning, in the very beginning, the scene with the older sister, Aiko.
Yeah.
Right? And you see, and her mother is committing suicide.
Yeah.
Leaving her 2 daughters stranded on the bank of this lake.
Yeah.
And Aiko's the oldest one, and Yumi is the younger one. Yumi.
Yeah.
Is the younger one, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And you just see that plays out very well over the 6 episodes.
Yeah.
And that scene is very early on. It's funny because it doesn't start to pay off
for quite some time until she goes back to the lake.
Well, yeah, you don't quite understand. Yeah, except that she has the daughter, and she thought the daughter was killed.
Dead.
It is everything. When you get to the end of it, there is a full sense of satisfaction. They only take like about 30 seconds or a minute to set up next season.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to see how they're going to handle the issue. Right? Even, as I said, even when I figured it out, I also figured out that Nishiki was the demon.
Oh, yeah, of course.
You know, I mean, but it's not confirmed. Like, that was my suspicion. It is not confirmed until 5.
Right at the end.
When you
episode
get the
6,
flashback.
Right. Oh, yes.
Well, no,
the flashback. Yes, you're right.
When you get the flashback of why Kayuri is in jail.
Kazuma Kiryu
is in jail. Okay, yeah. Kiryu is in jail because Nishiki has killed the boss.
Yep.
And
now you understand what would motivate him to start doing
this. What would motivate him to... He takes the blame for it.
Yeah.
Now, because it is... Yeah, simply because he can afford to do it.
Yeah.
And in some ways he does feel guilty. Here's the thing. This is all ethical stuff.
Yeah.
These are all ethical things going on. Like, we've got big ethical questions being raised with all of this. It is well done. It's made me think about this idea of redemption and how do you get redemption?
Mm-hmm.
And it's when Yumi just says to our hero.
There you go.
Okay. Our hero.
Yeah.
It's all your fault. If you hadn't wanted to be a Yakuza, none of this would have happened, basically.
Yeah.
Because it is a horrendous story how Nishiki ends up
turning into a monster.
Turning into this complete monster who is going to take down the entire Yakuza.
Yeah.
All of these things. And he's just been killing from the beginning.
Yeah.
And I mean, I never bought any of the red herrings. Like, I don't know why these guys thought that Aiko and her partner, her boyfriend, managed to steal all this money. They thought
on
they
their
were
own.
going to go
on
their, or did it, or they must be in league with the demon or whatever. Well, no, it was just an accident, essentially. They didn't know that this thing was packed with 10 billion yen.
The interesting thing is, like, I gotta say, not great security for moving $100 million.
No, yeah, billion, yeah, 100.
Yeah, 10 billion yen is $100 billion.
There's a whole bunch of things that I would say nobody is security conscious in this. Like, they don't even have doors on their friggin' houses.
I know.
I mean, they get set up, and it's actually really good how they get set up in this. And the whole, I mean, I don't know if we're going to spoil it. We might as well.
I think we're going to, yeah.
Yeah, you have to. So I followed this straight through. It was very well set up. As I said, it's just, the sitting and watching all the time is,
yeah, it's rough.
It was because you have to, it turns out that here's the point. You have to trust that you are going to get where you're going to go.
Yeah.
And because the funny thing is I haven't watched as much Japanese stuff. But because I've watched all the South Korean stuff, which can get very convoluted as well.
Yeah.
Very convoluted. And not as clear as some of the stuff we've done for the podcast.
No.
The podcast stuff is, if you think that we thought that was confusing sometimes, or convoluted sometimes, you should see some of the other stuff.
We've watched.
And Vincenzo is massively convoluted, which is why
every episode of Vincenzo, you get to the end, and it's like, here's the 5 minutes where we explain that everything you just watched was a secret setup for something else that was actually going on. Like every week.
You know,
It's
it was,
amazing.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, Vincenzo.
It really is.
Can't talk enough good about this. And I liked this. Like,
Yeah.
it worked. And I felt when I got to the end, everything had been resolved. And Nishiki, who had become this demon monster,
Yeah.
who was killing and setting up and wanted to destroy everything,
Yep.
you know, is actually, I don't know whether the procedure for is he dead or not, right? That's not clear because they don't cover his face when they put him in the ambulance.
Yeah,
It
is not clear at all at the end of the series whether he's going to be back next season.
Yeah, and the same thing with Aiko.
Yeah.
The older sister, right? But she has more of a chance probably of survival than he does, given what was going on. But I don't know, because they didn't cover either of their faces.
Well,
so
and I mean,
one has to assume they're alive.
Akira Nishikiyama, or Nishiki as everyone calls him, he did get stabbed in the stomach, and that does hurt, but that is all that happened to him.
Yeah, and he got beaten up.
He got the hell beaten out of him.
He was so beaten, and he had such great amount of blood loss. The same thing with Aiko. She got shot, but
she got shot a bunch. So
was still alive.
But they have it open for whatever they want. They have left it open for themselves, whatever they want to do next year.
Yes, except everybody knows that Nishi now is the demon.
Exactly. So that's going to be an issue for him.
Yes. So he's going to end up having to go to jail, or is he crazy and in a mental institution? We'll see next season.
Yeah. Or he escapes. Who knows?
Or he escapes. Yes. And continues his reign of terror. Because that's what the whole thing is. In this, there's this side plot of this demon guy that's going out and killing all of these people, and it's not in one clan or another.
Yeah, just going out there and murdering mobsters and carving satanic symbols onto their chests.
Yeah. And you know, it's so, but it's not a focus. The police are very interesting in this.
Well, of course.
You know, it was, you know, as they're sitting there watching these two basic Yakuza clan, the big clans.
Yeah, right? Getting ready to fight and just hanging out and waiting. And
fighting and hanging out, and the cops are the cops below him are going, well, shouldn't we intervene? Shouldn't we stop this? Nah. No. I've been waiting for this all my life. Let them kill one another, right? And
we'll clean up after it's done.
Yeah, we'll clean up after it's done. Let's let it go a little bit further. As many of these guys that are dead is good for me.
Yeah, it makes my job that much easier.
Yeah, it is. And I think the slow setup that taking, you know, how they took the two girls into the attitude towards women, but the two girls into, of course, the sex trade. They become sex workers, even though you only get one real statement about that.
Yeah.
Like you could say that they weren't, because you never see anybody. There's no sex in this. Right?
No. None whatsoever.
None whatsoever. But they are working for the house mother.
They are hostesses.
Brothel people.
Well, no,
they
I mean
it's hostesses.
Well, and that's the thing is the host culture in Japan is like a very different thing than regular sex work.
Yeah.
In that there are like sex workers, obviously, but there is also the concept of hosts and hostesses who essentially, you know, manage your evening to make sure you had a great evening out and you have company to sit next to you and laugh at your jokes.
Yeah.
And that is what they're doing. Now, does that frequently also bleed over into sex work? Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Yumi, because it is our hero who says that to her.
Oh, absolutely.
In her case, it has bled over. We also see that her sister was pregnant at one point. We see that back in 95.
Yep.
That her sister is pregnant because the madam, and ultimately Yumi takes it over. Takes over Serena's position, the original.
She ends up running Serena. after her sister gets Reina, the previous runner, like arrested for hiring underage girls.
Yeah. So, and you can see this. I think the character, like all of these different characters fit. I liked the fact that you could all tell them all apart, unlike
that does help.
When we were the last time we were talking about Cross, where it was a while before you could figure out
who was who,
because people looked too much alike.
Here, nobody looks alike at all. That is a big, help.
It is a big help. That you don't have any kind of set. They all are different. I thought the florist of Sile.
Yeah.
Geez, what? It's no wonder Yumi didn't want to go and meet this man and gave him the creeps.
I know.
But you see so much of the ritual being played out, the structures, the bowing. I mean, you can see this in South Korean, but it is nowhere near
as formalized as it is in the Japanese stuff. Yeah.
This Japanese stuff, even to the meals, and even when our hero and Nishi meet for the first time after he's come out of jail.
Yeah.
And he is also called the Dragon of
Dojima.
The Dragon of Dojima, although as he points out at one point, he doesn't have his eyes. And we don't understand what all of that's about
until
either.
You see his back.
You see his back. The dragon, he doesn't have his eyes. The dragon tattoo doesn't have eyes. We don't know the significance of that until like the last episode.
Yes.
And, when we find out, the second last episode, I guess, where we get the big fight where the fight that he was supposed to throw.
Yes.
And he doesn't throw it. He gives the other guy a knockout punch and passes out.
Yeah.
They're both passed out, but because he had the last punch,
he wins.
It's just a technical thing.
Yeah, it's a technical knockout.
And it is one of these horrible things like with what was it? The movie from the 50s with Anthony Quinn. With
Requiem for a Heavyweight?
Requiem for a Heavyweight, right?
Yeah.
It's that kind of a story.
Yeah.
Except that it is more
brutal here.
Brutal. This is a brutal story. Nishi, and he's turned crazy because Nishi, he is responsible for the death.
Yeah.
Of his. Well, he's not fully. He was used and manipulated.
He was scammed.
He was scammed. And as someone said, as he finds out afterwards, no, your sister, if she'd been in a real hospital, a reputable hospital, she could have been treated and she would have survived. Yeah. She had massive kidney damage, which only came out because she had become one of these hostesses, and they loved her in Serena's, the place, the restaurant. They loved her in Serena's, but I mean, she drank herself into a coma at one point.
Yeah, and that damaged her kidneys, and she had a pre-existing heart issue.
Yeah.
And so she couldn't do dialysis, and so it keeps her from being able to do dialysis, and the only thing that could save her was a kidney transplant. And that's how they con him, by saying he is not a match and they can get him a kidney.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is how they trick him.
It needs, because the guy needs, and I mean, like the beginning, the funny thing is by the time you get to the last 3 episodes, all the setup, well, because you just accept the setup, you can see it. The guy wants to build a building, which is why I was still saying Vincenzo, like the evil guy who has,
because it is all about building this one giant building. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the same way that they wanted to build this giant thing in Vincenzo.
Yeah, I know. It was so funny. And I, from that perspective, when I stood away, but, and he blows it.
Yeah.
With this one guy, the head of the
Dojima clan.
Dojima clan. Thank you. So he blows it with the Dojima clan.
Mm-hmm.
You can see this had an impression on me because I've watched the whole thing and I can remember it all.
You remember all the details.
Oh yeah, the Dojima clan, and the girl he gives, and it turns out she's his sister, because it's not clear right away who the girl is that he gives this necklace to.
Yeah.
And it contains like a seal that is needed to transfer.
Yeah, it's your legal seal.
Yes.
Your legal corporate
seal.
Legal corporate seal. Yeah.
Yeah. And you need that on documents to transfer property.
Yeah.
And things like that. And so they have, I'm still not sure who ordered this guy who was an American, who was living in Japan, who had married a Japanese woman.
Yeah.
And yet they still, of course, considered his daughter or his sister. Oh, no.
Sister.
But his sister. Yeah, but his sister looks Japanese. She sure as hell doesn't look white.
But she is blonde adjacent. So there you go.
Well, but all you have to do is look at her face.
I agree.
So was
it is
their
needlessly
mother
confusing.
Maybe
it's his half sister. She is a ton younger than he is.
Yes, so maybe it's a half sister. Maybe his.
That would actually make a lot of sense.
Yes, a half
narratively,
sister.
it's a lot clearer if it's his daughter. I don't know why they did that, but
Well, except
it
that
is his sister.
Yeah, if it's his daughter, you just say he married a Japanese woman.
Her look makes complete sense. Yes.
Yeah, but
I think narratively it would have been a lot cleaner had that been his daughter rather than his sister, especially given their relative ages. Yes,
and she's ash blonde, ash and brown, right? She's not. Her hair is not, maybe it's not black, but that it could have just been dyed lighter. You look at her
I agree.
So anyway, she has the thing. And so you have this whole subplot of there's the first heist.
Trying to get the
then there's
seal.
the second one, but they don't get the seal and they have to figure out where the seal is. And so everybody's looking for the seal. And so she had it in this necklace. He had given her a necklace that contained the seal. Yeah. And the bad guys eventually get the seal, do manage to transfer all of the land property to themselves.
And they're able to build the Millennium Tower.
Yes. Ugly as sin is that thing.
I don't know what they were thinking. It is not in the video game. It's just a regular, big tower. It doesn't have all of these giant weird protuberances on top.
Okay, so there's
extra weird.
So it's more like the Babel Tower in
It's
in
very close to the Babel Tower in Vincenzo. Yeah.
More. It should have. Well, yes, okay, in the original Japanese, but this one is just, as I said, ugly as sin.
It looks bizarre.
Not
you were
just
right
bizarre,
to call that
ugly.
out. It is
ugly.
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 I don't know what they were thinking with that design.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure that's a CGI design, but
of course it's
ugly.
Yeah, it really is.
And the interior, like the settings that, to me, like Nishiki's, because he then becomes the head basically of the Dojima.
Yeah, he's running essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, essentially he's the second in command, and he's running the Dojima clan or Yakuza group, whatever you want to call it. Family.
Family is the word they use. Yeah.
Family. So he's running. I loved his
his office is fantastic.
Beautiful look.
What a gorgeous set.
Yeah. No, I mean, I kept, every now and then I would go, this must have cost a fortune to make. Oh my God. In places, like other places, not so much, but whoa. And that room, his office with the stairs and everything else. Now they make multiple uses of it.
Oh, yeah.
And it's where the final battle takes place.
Yep.
But I also thought that sometimes, if I may say so, some of these families are pretty dumb at not figuring things out.
It's definitely an issue. I feel like this was not that hard to figure out, guys.
And is everybody, are the underlings that dumb? Sometimes you're going, the guy's screaming and hollering, and no, we got to go after. Wait a thing. Aren't you supposed to have this level of patience?
Apparently not.
And but you want to track him down. Well, who is he? Like the demon and stuff.
Yeah, you don't have any leads.
You don't have any leads. Do you know the police can't find him? You guys can't find him. And because it's Nishiki, it's no wonder nobody can find him, because I understand why nobody would have thought it was Nishiki.
Oh, yeah.
But I figured I did, as I said, he was high on my list.
Yeah, for who
because it can't, because it is so, this demon is so good at what he's doing.
And we see him murdering people.
Yes, and you're going, No, 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 no. It can't be these dimwits or these people who are, I mean, and the fire where, I mean, you can see why Aiko thought her daughter was dead.
Oh, yeah. The giant explosion at the manga bar.
Yeah, because she kind of came out. It was a manga bar, and our hero managed to save the little girl.
Yeah.
Because she hid in his closet. So she probably would have survived the fire.
Yeah, but
not the fire necessarily.
Kazuma Kiryu manages to grab her beforehand.
Yeah, and takes her out, but can't find Aiko because Aiko is there as she watches the whole thing blow up. She'd gone out for donuts for her daughter, and so
that's why she thinks she's dead.
And that's why she thinks she's dead, because the whole thing, they just burn the whole thing down. But it turns out that Kiryu has taken her back to then can't find Aiko, so takes her back to the sister. And then you get the flashback to her trying to find her sister. Yeah. Everything, though, revolves around the dragon.
Yeah.
And that's why it's called Like a Dragon. He wants to be like the Dojima dragon.
Yeah.
And that he wants to be the Dojima dragon. It's funny, because the dragon, it has a different connotation in China, but anyway.
Yes.
And the mountain and everything else. But here, right, here it is, you can see, and you see him as a child, right?
Yeah.
And then after that, for whatever reason, after that, their parents die. So, well,
we know why his parents die.
I missed that. Somehow or another, I missed the fact that his parents are dead and how they died.
Well, we only find out right at the end. But yeah, you missed one line from Akira.
Okay, I missed the why.
Yeah. Well, no, we never found out why. We just know who did it.
I wanted to know the why.
Yeah,
I know who.
The weird part is, I don't know that that's ever revealed, even in the games.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I know who.
Yeah, you know who did it. You just don't know why. I will tell you a fun story about that in a bit. Once we're done talking about the show, we're going to move into talking about the game, and I'll have some things to say.
Yeah, because, I mean, watching it as an episode, it is as good as some of the other stuff.
It's definitely with the other Korean dramas you watch. It is definitely on the level you're expecting of quality from the Korean dramas you love. That's fair to say?
Yeah. The really good ones, this is up there with them.
Yeah. It's not Vincenzo, but it's really good.
No, well, nothing's Vincenzo. Vincenzo is in a world of its own. Is in a place of its own.
It really is delightful. If you haven't watched Vincenzo, people, watch Vincenzo and then listen to us talking about it's weird because it's 16 episodes and every episode is a feature-length film.
Yeah, and it is just...
So it's 32 hours, basically, of television. And we've reviewed every single episode. And it is a delight.
Yes.
But yeah, so... I see why you would put this... You would rank this there, right? Why you would put this there.
Yeah, and it's some of the other dramas that I've watched, like the police dramas and stuff like that. Not so much... They don't do... It's always fighting the corruption in South Korea.
Yeah.
Massive corruption, not so much that there's organized crime in South Korea. Now there is sort of organized crime, but they don't focus. That's not
largely not what the plots are about.
And the funny thing is, after I finished watching it, and I just finished watching the last hour and a half this morning, or about an hour and 20 minutes this morning.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, I thought I'm not watching any other TV. That's why everything's so fresh. Because
nothing has had a chance to override it in your mind.
No, except in my mind, I thought, the Americans just can't do anything this good. No. And I'm not sure why. Like even Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul, things that we like, but Breaking Bad, which is about crime.
Yeah.
And the rest of it, it doesn't have, I want to say panache.
I think that's part of it.
That's part of it, right? And it doesn't have, it is, when, maybe, and because I'm thinking about, I've been thinking about something I'm going to be writing, and these ideas of redemption.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, well, why can't you do it? And it is redemption and responsibility. And it that is and paying for one's sins now.
Yeah.
And making atonement now and getting your punishment now, right? Yeah. That is the key if you're looking at the ethical issues of all of this. Mm-hmm. This show pretty much it's really hard, I would say, when you have a Western mindset, a Christian mindset, for example, to understand how clearly our hero accepts that it is his fault. This whole thing got set in motion because he wanted to be a Yakuza.
Right. And
he begged. He wanted to be the Dragon of Doshima.
Yeah.
No, Dojima. He wanted, yeah, and that's all there is to it. He wanted this, and everything that follows afterwards is based on that decision, and he does take responsibility for that and try to make it right. Now, I mean, that a lot of things happened that had nothing to do with him.
Yes.
But that was the turning point.
Yeah.
And they couldn't talk him out of it. Like, and they were all to blame for the first heist that opens it up in number 1.
Yeah.
Like that heist, that these are a bunch of kids and they're smart.
Oh yeah.
And they do a really good job of the heist. The problem is they stole from an arcade that was owned by the Tojo clan.
Yeah. And it puts them in a bind.
Yeah, and then we get by the end of it. Well, they don't know that. The kids don't know it.
Of course not.
Except our hero is trying to. Everybody was supposed to have left.
Yeah.
On the bus in the morning. Mm-hmm. And then he will leave later. Because he's the oldest. And the rest of them decide that they're going to make pancakes and stuff and have breakfast with the kids and the rest of the kids in the orphanage. And it sure as hell doesn't look like any kind of horrible orphanage.
Oh no, it's a really nice place.
It's a really nice place. They've got this big kitchen and they're making pancakes that look like hippos and pancakes that look like monkeys. And it's a wonderful little scene.
It is.
And then all of a sudden these guys from the Tojo clan show up.
Yeah.
Because they know who's stolen the money.
Yes.
And they are about to kill. And that's when the father in the orphanage, the man who runs the orphanage, just walks and everybody just stops. And that should have, had we understood anything, that should have been your clue. They just stop. They listen to him. They do what he says, even though they know he's retired.
Yeah. Because that's how serious a guy he was.
That's how big and serious a guy he was in the Yakuza.
Yeah.
And so he says, you stop. And you take the children. They're his children, so he has to take responsibility for them. Mm-hmm. He says that more later on. Yeah. But at this point, he has to go and get dressed because he's going to have to go see the Don, as we would say in the Italian mob. We would use the term Don.
Meaning he has to present himself correctly.
Yes, he has to be. And then you have all of these rituals. Mm-hmm. Unbelievable. And the one, as I said, the one that was even like because we see Nishiki at the end in the second last
episode.
No, I think it's the second last where they finally meet. And Nishiki has been arguing that he will take care of the dragon.
Yeah.
Because he is still known as the dragon, even though he doesn't have his eyes.
Yeah.
So he wants the right to take care of the dragon from the big boss.
Yeah.
And so they're letting him take care of the dragon. But you see them at the top of the stairs and they kneel and they have a tea ceremony. Mm-hmm. And you can just see there's that 5 seconds, Nishiki is still the boss. It doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
And Yuri, never mind, our hero here, the dragon, right, it just does it like that. 5 seconds later, picks up his sake picks up is
because the boss goes first.
The boss always goes first, and he recognizes the chain of command in a way that nobody else ever does, right?
Yeah.
It was a everybody is in this, and you saw it at the beginning, this constant ritual and this constant structure, and the power that is invested in the Dons.
Yeah.
I'm just going to use that term, right? The heads of each of these separate families.
Right.
And but it struck me that the ethical structures are very different in terms of how they are taking. And Nishiki, I mean, when I watched at the end, I almost cried as you see this tear coming up. I don't know how the hell he did that, because I don't think it was editing.
No.
And this tear just
He's a good actor
out of his, and he is. Oh, they all are. I'm not going to complain about that at all.
Yeah.
There's just a style of art acting, and everybody screams at one another all the time.
Yeah.
It kind of drives you crazy. But that's a style of acting, right? It's just like watching Bollywood films and having to have music where it doesn't belong. Never mind. That's
it
the
belongs
style.
there. That's Bollywood music.
That's right. So we live with it, right?
Exactly.
And it's an impressive piece. It's worth the time it takes to sit down and watch. Now, as an adaptation of the game, I don't know, but as setting up the next season, because shall we tell the twist?
Okay. Yes. That their dad is the one who killed all of their parents. And he set up an orphanage to look after the children whenever he killed an entire family.
Yeah, well, whenever he killed the parents of the family.
Well, they're...
And aunts and uncles and things.
So exactly. There was nobody left. Yeah, because mob wars get so intense back in the past, and this is the backstory of the thing, that mob wars would get so intense that, they would wipe out entire families. And he... would be like, but I don't have to kill a baby. That would be insane. So he created an orphanage to look after all of these babies.
And children specifically.
Yeah, those specifically.
And
anyone
also,
over a toddler
as he
probably
said,
getting killed.
Also, as he said, I didn't want any of you to enter this life. He was so opposed to these people, but he was the dragon of Dojima.
Yeah. The fiercest killer they had.
The fiercest killer they had. And that's what our hero wanted to be. And then it turns out that in the mob fights, the war that were happening, the back of the father's, we'll just call him father, coat was slashed open.
And he sees the same tattoo.
And he sees part of the tattoo.
Yeah.
And he looks at him. And it's only because Nishiki has earlier said, but father killed our parents.
Yeah. That he makes the connection.
Father killed our parents. And then you look at this and he sees it at the end, and that's how it ends.
Yep. That's the last shot of it.
The last shot of it, that this man who has taken care of all of these children all their lives and is still taking care of because some of them are very young, new children in these wars. But that's also, I'm assuming, for whatever reason, because we don't know how he got out of
the mob. Yeah.
Out of the Yakuza. Now he's still part. It's funny because given the respect that they pay him.
Yeah.
They all know who he is. And nobody else twigs to it.
Yeah.
And when he goes in, he is treated with a lot of respect, but he's also treated as someone who has left. But there's no explanation as to why he's been allowed to leave.
Yes, and still have this position of respect.
And he says, the kids said, but we wanted to be free. And he said, if you join the Yakuza, you will never be free.
Yeah.
Right? And even as it stands, even though he retired, he's still not free.
He's still in it.
Yeah. And is affected by the constraints put around him.
Oh, of course.
So like it's like the whole thing works.
Yeah.
As I said, I
am glad to hear that it can work for someone who isn't familiar with the existing story. Now, I'll tell you what the actual story of Yakuza is, and you can see why I'm so disappointed by comparison.
Yeah.
So first off, fun fact. Fun
fact.
Well, no.
Okay.
See, the problem I had with it is at every turn, they because they're trying to make it a more standard drama, full of twists and reveals and things like that. They're doing it in a much more, how do I put this, basic and TV friendly way, rather than feeling like a novel, which is what the games feel like. They feel like you're reading a novel because the complexity and the character depth and the kinds of twists they have. Now, what we have watched is a adaptation of a tiny portion of Yakuza 0, which is the prequel, and it is unique among prequels, I would say, because it's the first time I've ever seen someone making a prequel later, where if someone was coming to the series new, I would actually say start with the prequel. It actually works. Like, they succeeded in making a better first chapter for the story than the actual first chapter was. But
okay.
But the only, it's only the tiniest element of Zero that is being adapted, which is that the entire plot of Zero is about all of the wrangling behind the scenes to try and get the rights to build on that piece of property. Right. And so it's tough to say, and this is something that maybe they can get into in the series later on. Right. But if Yakuza is about one thing, it's about Kazuma Kiryu, the character, who is part of an ensemble here, but unquestionably the main character of the series.
He's the only one you see when you watch some of the video.
For good reason. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it is largely the story of Kazuma Kiryu trying to figure out what it means to be a man. Like, just trying to figure out masculinity is basically what the story is about. And that sounds like an exaggeration, but it really isn't. That's what the story is about. Because, and this is, I love the heightenedness. Because in Zero, you do see how he and Nishiki join the Mafia, right? And there's none of this being tricked into joining the Mafia or having to join the Mafia. No, they wanted to join in the Mafia. Because they're dead.
Yeah.
Wait
a sec.
Please.
Wait a sec.
Yeah.
But he wants to join. He didn't get.
I'm getting the point. Yes.
Okay.
But he was taking no steps to do it, and he had no. He lucks into a situation where he can join the Mafia in the show, whereas in the game, his dad's in the mob, and that's all there is to it. His dad is the head of a Mafia family, and so he wants to do what his dad does. And that's why he is so desperate to be in the Mafia, because his dad is, the guy who runs this orphanage, right? But in the games, he's still running a crime family. He is second in command of the entire Tojo clan as the head of his own crime family, right?
Okay.
And so his two sons are desperate to follow in his footsteps.
Okay, so Nishiki, the two of them are brothers then.
Yeah, they're effective. Well, I mean, not literal brothers, but they're the two guys who are the same age who were raised by him. Right. Okay. And so they are desperate to join the Mafia. And there's a wonderful scene where they beg him to join the Mafia. And he, viciously beats them up and says, this is what the Mafia is. Do you really want that? And they just keep letting him beat them up because they will not give up on their dream to join the mob. Right? Because that's what he does. And he doesn't want them to join the mob, but it's like, what were they going to want to do with their life if this is, if this is what they see masculinity is, right?
Now here's the interesting thing is because when you look at it from the Western perspective, what the problem is that the boys don't want to be joining them. That's Michael Corleone, right? Exactly. No, I don't want to be part of this at all.
Yeah.
Never mind. Go on. Tell the story.
And this is, by the way, how beautifully Japanese the scene is. Like, because they're begging him to let them join the mafia, and of course, men can't cry, so the scene has to be taking place in the pouring rain because men can't cry.
Well, they listen to the Everly Brothers. What can I say?
No, I just think it's such a great statement about.
I'll
it's
do
just
my crying in the rain.
Exactly. Yeah, no, but it's such a great idea about the presentation of masculinity. Is that none of these men can cry when that's obviously the emotional state they're at. So again, well, it's the same thing that happens at the end of Squid Game. That good rain knows when to fall.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, you need the rain to fall because you can't cry. Of course, I mean, that's just, again, about the ridiculous level of masculinity they demonstrate. And so the idea that there was previously a Dragon of Dojima, that's not part of the thing. That's just what people called Kazuma Kiryu because he was the toughest of all of the mobsters, right?
Right.
Kazama, his dad, was not the toughest mobster of all. He was the most heartless murderer. He was essentially the clan's assassin. And that's why, it was such a surprise that it turned out that he had these kids he took care of, because he has this extra part of his personality where he felt guilty when there were babies left over, and he looked after these kids. And because of that guilt, that's why he didn't want to let them in. But of course, these are his sons, and he couldn't deny them wanting to live this life. And Zero is fantastic. Honestly, it's interesting because it would have been so easy to just adapt Zero into a season of television because it is so perfectly suited. But they didn't. They did a hybrid. And what's funny is in the show, in the games, so he joins the mafia when he's 20, right?
Yeah.
19 or 18 or 19, and somewhere around there. And so the main action of Yakuza 0 takes place 3 years later when he's 22, right, in 1988. And so the whole game is basically set around this whole scam over real estate in 1988. And then another 7 years pass with him just being a guy in the Yakuza before the incident that kicks off him going to jail. Whereas in the show, he's never actually in the mafia. He never does mafia things. He quote unquote joins, but he's just basically an MMA fighter that they bet on. He never actually does any mob things or is in the mob. Whereas how we're introduced to him in Yakuza 0 is, like, the very first way we're introduced to the character is he's beaten a guy up for a loan shark. It's like a guy owes money, and so he's the guy who you send to beat him up. And that's how we meet Kazuma Kiryu in the video games, right?
Now, and that's funny because I have seen that, because I remember when you constantly talking about it. And
of course,
when I'm watching you playing it, right?
Yeah.
So I can just put it on. And I do remember some of that.
Exactly.
Now that you're telling me about it, but I never, ever got a sense of what it was all about.
Well, no, of course. And so this is the big change. And so they have massively changed the plot of 1, although they've kept some key things. And for the one thing that really bothered me, right? This is the one thing that really bothered me is it doesn't really feel like in the original, Kazuma Kiryu has a very good reason for wanting to sacrifice himself for Akira to go to jail. And that's because in the original, Akira's sister isn't dead yet. In the original. What has happened is that his sister has there's nothing about her kidneys, nothing about that. She just has a bad heart. And so she keeps ending up in the hospital, and they're orphans, so there's nobody to look after her. So when Akira kills the boss, because he attacked Yumi and some stuff that happened, and over some stuff that happened in Yakuza 0, right? When he kills him, Kazuma Kiryu is like, you can't abandon your sister. I'm going to go to jail for you.
Yes.
And in the original, you don't ever find out how Akira turned evil. So all the stuff about his sister dying. And so he has a concrete reason to go to jail. It's so that Akira can be with his sister.
Okay.
Right? That's the key element. That he can be with his sister and honestly maybe save his sister's life. Because there's no fake, in the original, there's no fake kidney thing, right? That's not a scam because it's just she's got a bad heart. And he can get a heart from Indonesia if he can come up with $500,000, 50 million yen. And the only way to do that is, of course, to be like the most, because he's still like 23 at this point. He has to be the most rabid, violent, desperate Yakuza, scamming for every dollar he possibly can. And so he spends a year after Kazuma Kiryu goes to jail doing that, like becoming the most desperate, most violent, most cruel mobster he can to get the money. And then his second in command steals all the money for the heart and runs off and disappears. And so he's done all of this, sacrificed every bit of honor he had, and let his best friend go to jail for him, and his sister still dies and doesn't get the heart transplant.
And therefore, hence guilt.
And that's why he turns on the mafia. And that's why he's like, I'm going to tear it all down. Right?
Yeah.
Now, here's the other thing they completely changed, and this is weirdly, that I had a big problem with. Here's what I had a much bigger problem with. In the game, there's no Aiko.
There's no older sister.
There's no older sister. Everything that they've assigned to, I mean, well, not everything, but most, like all of the key parts of the plot that have been assigned to Aiko in the game, that's all stuff Yumi does. And it really ticks me off because as a consequence, Yumi doesn't really get to have a character in the show.
No, it's true.
She doesn't really get to do anything because all of the stuff she did in the story has been assigned to this new character. So what happens is, and this is where it's kind of convoluted, but I mean, you can see how this would have played, especially since you love Vincenzo. Played, and I would argue played better. So essentially, she's assaulted by Sohei Dojima, and Akira kills him to protect her, right? And Kiryu goes to jail, and she is left traumatized and messed up. And they do a thing where she has temporary amnesia because it's a soap opera, right?
Well, yeah.
But the point is, she needs to be of some value to the mob. And so she's working as a hostess, and a guy ends up really liking her, and so they assign her to be his mistress, because this guy is going places in politics. Right?
Okay.
And so she has a daughter with him in order to, essentially, so they can
cement the relationship
and control this guy.
Yeah.
But then he has the opportunity to marry the daughter of the prime minister, which would put him on the track to become the obvious choice for this party to take over the government in the near future. And so he goes to the leadership of the mafia and says, I'll formalize my deal with you, but you have to get rid of this woman who is, this woman and her child, right? I can't have that hanging over my head. So they go to murder her. Of course, her father, Kazama, won't let that happen. So, but he makes it look like she's disappeared and killed, and she goes back to Tokyo as a fake sister, Mizuki. And this is all when her daughter, Haruka, was only like 2. This all happens when she was like 1 or 2. And so no one knows what happened to Yumi, and her daughter thinks that, that this aunt, this woman that keeps visiting her is her aunt, when it's actually her mother. And here's the main thrust of the game. So Kazuma Kiryu gets out of jail. Right? It's been 10 years. He gets out of jail. He can't find anybody. Akira's a cruel guy running a mob family. He's got no connections. Everybody wants him dead because he is Onogoroyoshi, which is the word they keep using in the show, but they never tell you what it means. It means
Dragon.
boss killer. No. Onogoroyoshi, boss killer. Onogoroyoshi.
Oh, the Onogoroyoshi is the guy who killed the boss.
Is someone who kills their patriarch. And it's the worst thing you can be in the mafia. Yeah, exactly. They never tell you what onogoryoshi
I thought it was
means.
just another word for dragon.
No, it means, well, yeah. And
dragon without eyes,
No, it means guy who killed, it means boss killer. And it's the worst thing you can be. I know, it would have been good if they translated that.
At some point.
Well, no, just translate the word like you're translating everything else.
Mm-hmm.
You're translating all the other words, translate that word. Write down boss killer. You're the boss killer. There, done. I've solved the translation issue. Because you didn't realize that's what they were all pissed at him about.
Well, no, I knew that they were all pissed. Well, no, we didn't know. Oh, maybe that's why they didn't do it in translation, because it would then tell you.
No, except that all the Japanese people watching it know that means boss killer, because it means boss killer. No, I know. It's just a failure of translation.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're supposed to know right away what he did. It's just that the twist at the end of the series is that he didn't actually do it. Whereas in the game, that's just the first thing that happens, is we see Akira kill this guy and then you cover for him. Right? Like, there's no mystery in the games about what happened. You know it happened because you're playing as the guy it happened to. Yeah. Right? And so he's out and he runs into this little girl, Haruka, who's looking for her aunt. Right? Who's come to town, and suddenly he finds out that everybody is looking for this girl because she is the one. There's some kind of key on her that is going to lead everybody to the 10 billion yen that has been stolen. And this isn't about a mob war. It is just the clan's money that has been stolen. Right? There's no mob war. There's no Omi alliance. It's just the clan's money. So everybody in the clan wants it. And she's being protected by the guy they already want to kill because he's a boss killer. And it is a whole game about uncovering the mystery of what happened in the 10 years he was gone, what the meaning of the little girl, like why everyone needs the little girl, everything that's happening. Like that's what the game is about. And of course, it all leads to this giant showdown because it turns out that the reason the $100 million, that Yumi did steal the $100 million, which is why her daughter is the key to finding it. But the reason she did it is she partnered, is that essentially the Sarah, the current head of the Tojo clan, was worried that this politician is going to essentially take over the mafia and use it for his own evil purposes, right? And he believes corrupted, and he believes that this guy and his allies have massively corrupted the mob already. So he can't trust anyone in the mob except for Kazama. So he and Kazama and Yumi stole the 10 billion yen, which is actually the politician's money, the illegal slush fund he's been building up through bribes, so that he can use that money to secure himself the position of prime minister. So there's a giant showdown. Kazuma Kiryu finally has his fight with Nishiki. It's wonderful. The mob boss shows up and he kills the politician shows up and he kills Yumi, and Nishiki kills the politician. And then he's dying. It's a horrible situation. And he admits that he was trying to destroy the mafia for quite good reasons. Nobody's going to argue with that. Right.
Yeah.
And then he blows up the 10 billion yen. And this is the key image. This is like the iconic image from the entire series. He blows up the 10 billion yen at the top of the Millennium Tower. And this is all happening at Christmas in Japan. Right? And so essentially he creates a giant snowstorm of money that flies down and flutters around the entire city. And it's this beautiful ending shot that now there's a snowstorm for Christmas, but it's all of the mob, it's all of the government's stolen money. And that actually becomes important later because someone, a character is a homeless guy at that time, we learn, got $100,000 of that money and managed to completely turn his life around and become a multimillionaire, and he becomes one of the series' main characters. But it's like, this is the key image of the series, is this giant snowstorm of money, and it's the perfect way to end the game, and I would argue the perfect way to end a season of television, because there's no twist at the end about who did it, and this is the thing that I have found most touching, and that leads you into who Kazuma Kiryu is as a person and why this is a series that is just about figuring out masculinity. Because the reveal that Kazama killed his parents is not a twist at the end of the show. So he's hiding Haruka at one point, and the mob finds out what they are, and they come to kill him, and there's a giant fight. And Kazama manages to save her, but is mortally wounded in the process. And his dying confession to Kazuma Kiryu is that the Sunflower Orphanage is a place I started for the children of all of the people I killed. And Kazuma Kiryu's response to that is, I don't care. You're still my father, and that's all that matters. And that is his last interaction with his father. And it's like unbelievably beautiful because it's all about, who he is and what he believes being a man is. And he's like, I never knew my parents. It doesn't matter to me who they used to be. It matters who raised me and who I am. And as a consequence, and you might think, well, that's just something he said. No, that's his attitude going forward. And there's never a part of the story for the next X amount of games with him looking into his family because he's a guy who just believes in what's in front of him. Because at the end of the story, everybody's dead except for him and Haruka and the detective.
Okay.
And so he has to become her father. And the rest of the series is him trying to figure out how to be a parent as all of these mob wars continue to go on. And so when I say that it's really a series about trying to figure out what masculinity is, it is. Because 0 and 1 are about him trying to figure out how to be a man, and the rest are about him trying to figure out how to be a father.
Okay, so
you can see that all of that was removed.
Well, as I'm listening to you, I'm going, okay, so they're going to, the funny thing is I can see why they adapted it the way they did. I don't even, I can see why you're upset.
Yeah.
Right. At the shifts and the changes and how the story works. I think that there is still, they may be dealing with some of these issues as they go forward. I'm assuming they were limited because I'm going, okay, I'm listening to you telling this story and I'm going, so in 6 issues, in six episodes, and they were only 42 minutes long.
Yeah, but that's still 4 hours.
Yes, I know. But the story you're telling me, I'm going, okay, that's even more, it's almost even more convoluted than
what was actually made.
That I think that they streamlined Yumi, and it was actually, rather than having
my problem is that Yumi doesn't really get to have a character anymore because all of the interesting stuff she does has been assigned to this sister character, and I'm not sure why.
Well, I think that, because somebody's got to take care of Haruko. But
that's what, because but then they don't kill off her sister at the end. I assumed it was because they wanted somebody to look after us, but then they don't even kill off Aiko.
Yeah, well, we're not sure.
No, we're not sure, but it certainly seems like she's sure, be alive.
Well, I don't know. When you read the thing, they're talking about how they're not so sure she's going to live because she's lost a lot of blood, and there's a couple of other issues. After all, she was shot. So
she was shot, yeah.
And it's an amazing. She'd already passed out, and her blood pressure is, and a whole bunch of other things. We'll see. I think that they might be waiting to see the reaction.
Yeah,
like the writers for season 2.
Yeah,
see the reaction, and then they'll figure out who they're going to kill and who they're not. Because here's the thing: is Aiko is not a particularly likable character.
No.
I understand her, and
but that's my issue, is they take everything that would have made Yumi a complicated character and they just offloaded it to this other character to essentially be half a villain, but that leaves Yumi without anything to do.
Well, she didn't know that. I'm not saying that. I don't think that she was completely without things to do, because she has to show up. She has to make the attempt to at least understand. I mean, you get the understanding. This is my sister. She offers to be killed so that there would be no problem. She's not. You see, I would be willing, because you're saying that, I'm going, no, she's still there. And at one point, like when you talk about masculinity, I mean, you're looking at this guy who's been in prison, and I mean, he has no relationship. And he sometimes goes back. Like, I thought the flashbacks back to the good things that they did as kids, or the other parts of it, was a good way to complaint. So you're preparing also for, as you say, Akira or Nishiki, however you want to, whatever, his either dying, like I assumed he was dead, and I'm only saying it's just that they didn't cover over his face, so I'm assuming I guess he's still breathing.
Who knows?
He sure as hell looks dead to me when he was being carried out.
Oh, I know.
So, or that just might be a production issue. Somebody forgot to cover it. So it is. And I mean, you're making an assumption that our hero, why I can't.
Kiryu.
Yeah, Kiryu. That
Yeah.
Kiryu is then going to go and try to find out what happens to his parent. But I didn't think that that's what would happen. It would be that our old dragon, the guy who is their father, is going to have to explain all of this to him now, what they're going to do. And yes, and when I think about, they obviously see enough in the games that they will be able to take this someplace else. And the question, I am sure that they are all over TikTok and Instagram and everything to see whether or not they want Yumi and Kiryu to get married.
Yes.
I mean, that
the kind of thing they want to do. Yeah.
Yeah. So that they're making this for the TV audience. And you're right. Okay. I can see why you're so upset. I also saw why people were upset by Halo after I listened to my grandson. I understand it, because it has changed things. But when I think about television, and when I think of the norms and the structures often of these kinds of dramas, at least in Eastern culture, right, that I've been watching, it's never, there's a lot that's never said. Yeah. And I think that we kind of miss, like, I suspect that some of your complaints, there were keys and clues somewhere along the line, but I also, to make them children, the fact that he was the dragon and then felt guilty about it, and that's why he is raising these children in the orphanage, as opposed to remaining in the system as a killer. Yeah. Because that's what you're saying. I mean, in the games,
he never stopped being in the mob.
Yes, he never stops being involved. He's a killer. He's also an assassin, right? Yeah. The whole thing. He is a horrid man. And the beating of the two sons, right? Because he doesn't want them to join. Well, what did you expect? You're their father. Mm-hmm. And this is what you do. And it looks exciting, and it got you all this money, and the lifestyle that we're living and respect, and the living that we've got is all because this is who you are. And so why wouldn't we want to become like you within this cultural structure that they were raised?
Exactly.
And so, I mean, I don't know, because this is the first time I've sort of watched. I'm trying to think if I've ever watched anything Japanese in particular, because most of it didn't feel like watching. Mm-hmm. I haven't looked at anything that's sort of, I think it's Squid Game that got me into watching South Korean television.
It is 100%.
Yes, it was Squid Game, right?
Yeah.
And this might make me
check out some Japanese stuff, which there you go.
Yeah, you go.
If it all accomplishes that, it's worth it. But another thing that I think that's going to piss off the fans, and it certainly pissed off me, is...
You mean the fans who played the game?
Yeah, well, that's why I call them the fans. You know, this has an existing fan base. That's why they made it. They didn't make it because it didn't have an existing fan base.
Yeah.
So the fans are relevant to why this exists.
Well, it boomeranged on Halo.
Well, no, but the thing I would argue with Halo is, I think they had to make a lot of dramatic choices because, and I can't be very, kind about this, Halo doesn't have a good story. It barely has a story. It's a shooter. It doesn't have any memorable characters. It doesn't have any in-depth plots. It doesn't have anything you could build a show around. You're gonna have to make big adaptation choices to make a Halo show, and they ended up, not making the fans happy, and I get that, but you had to do something. Yeah. My argument with Yakuza is you didn't have to do anything, because here is how Yakuza 0 starts, right? And I'm going to tell you the first chapter of Yakuza 0, and you try to tell me, well, that wouldn't be an incredible episode of television.
Go on.
Okay, I'm doing it. That's what's happening. So, it starts with Kazuma Kiryu beating a guy up to get the $3,000. And again, it's not even that much money. It's $3,000. This guy owns a loan shark. And then he goes to the loan shark and he gives him the money. And then he goes and he runs into Akira, and they have, a fun night out, drinking and getting food, flirting with girls, because they're 22-year-olds with a lot of money because they work in the mob.
Yeah. As I said, Goodfellas.
Exactly. Yeah, they're living the Goodfellas life.
Yeah.
So then that night, it rolls to morning, and there's a report on the news. Hey, remember that guy who Kazuma Kiryu beat up in a vacant lot? He's dead. And so he gets called into the mob leadership to yell at him for being so bad at being an enforcer that he killed a guy he was just supposed to get money from. And they order him to turn himself into the police because they can't have this kind of heat of mob people. Because if mob people kill other mob people, the cops don't worry about it too much.
Yeah.
If the mob people are killing civilians, that's a big deal. And so that's what you learn right away. And so Kazuma Kiryu is like, I did not kill that guy. So what the hell is going on? Meanwhile, and he flashes back to how he got into this mob. This scene of his dad beating him up, right? Viciously beating him and Nishiki up. And it's in the pouring rain, and he's begging to be in the mob, and he gets let in. But we find out crucially that he's in the Dojima family because his dad wouldn't let him join his family. He he wouldn't let him be in his family. He wouldn't let him be a nepotism case. He's like, if you want to succeed in the mafia, you're going to have to do it on your own. I can get you in, but you will not be my lieutenant. Right? So then he goes to try and find out essentially who killed this guy. So he goes to track down the loan shark and say, what the hell happened here? I didn't kill that guy. And so you get a great fight scene when he beats up the other people who work at the loan shark office. And he goes to confront the loan shark, and the lieutenant who told him to turn himself into the cops turns up. And we find out that what's going on here is that they need and this is what you'll recognize from the show, they need the property, right, on this vacant lot. Right? They need the property in this vacant lot to build the Millennium Tower, but nobody can get in touch with the person who owns the rights to this land. And we've already spent, $100 million buying up all the land around it so we can build the Millennium Tower. If we don't get this lot, all of that money becomes worthless. And the only person who knows how to get in touch with the person, or not get in touch with the person, but who knows how to get the property for this vacant lot, right? That's worth $10 million, even though it's just a vacant lot, because it's the last piece of the puzzle you need to build the Millennium Tower, is Kazama. But the problem is this lieutenant ratted in an attempt to become the second in command of the Tojo clan, had ratted Kazama out the previous year, and now he's doing 3 years in jail. And so they think we need to get this information out of him. And the only person who could conceivably get this information out of him is his beloved son, Kazuma Kiryu. So now I've framed you for murder. So you're going to have to work for me. And of course, Kiryu says, yeah, I don't think so. Because again, he's a man of honor. That's at the core of who he is. So he goes straight to the head of their clan, Sohei Dojima, to try and retire from the mob. Because he's like, if I retire from the mob, I don't have to follow their rules, and you can't use me against Kazama anymore. And the lieutenant is having none of it, so he viciously beats him and demands he demands that he agree with the plan, and he won't let him see the head of the clan. And Kazuma refuses, and they're like, fine, we're just going to kill you, which we can do. And in his anger, he says, you're not in the Yakuza anymore. I don't have to listen to you. And so the entire time we've been seeing Kazuma Kiryu get beat up over and over again by this lieutenant. But then the lieutenant says, you're out and we're going to kill you. And so Kazuma Kiryu turns around and lays out in a single punch the lead henchman of the lieutenant. The lieutenant's like, you're not allowed to punch your superior. What are you talking about? And Kazuma Kiryu says, you just said I'm out. Meaning, I get to beat the hell out of all of you. This entire time, through this whole chapter when you've been beating me up. Yeah, that's only because you were my superior. Now that I'm not in the mafia, I can viciously beat all of you, and we get an unbelievably wonderful epic fight scene. Right? But at the end of it, he finally meets Dojima, and Dojima is like, okay, you're out. You don't have to worry about this guy who got killed in the parking lot. That's mafia business. You don't have to worry about what's going on with Kazama. That's all mafia business. You want it out of the mafia? You're out of the mafia. And so Kiryu stumbles out. He has won his fight, but he has lost everything he wanted in his whole life. And because good rain knows when to fall, it's pouring rain again because he can't weep for having lost everything. And just as he's at his lowest moment, a guy comes to him on the street and says that I can fix this for you. And boom, that's the end of the first chapter and would be the end of the first episode. Now, if they had the guts to make this a show with a main character rather than one of these ensemble cast shows, you can't tell me that that wouldn't have been the most satisfying hour of television you've seen.
Just let me think about it.
Because
I'm listening to it and I'm going, okay, so yeah, now I can see why. Now you can see why I said Vincenzo.
Yeah.
Why I said Vincenzo, right? Because there are similarities.
There are similarities.
And stuff
there absolutely are.
For sure. So he's, and I was thinking about the other Korean one that we always watch, that turned into Rocky Handsome.
Oh, yes. Our beloved Man from Nowhere.
Man from Nowhere.
Oh,
right?
Perfect,
I'm thinking about Man
movie.
From Nowhere. So he's sort of like a man from nowhere.
Exactly. That kind of a character.
That kind of a character. And
yeah, who is completely closed off.
Yes. And so, and this one is giving the Man from Nowhere a backstory. It's a little weird, different. And I'm not saying that it would be.
Yeah, that's exactly the same.
And I really wonder.
But you see how if you had watched what I just described to you as an hour of television, you have been like, well, that was amazing.
Yeah, it is. It is. Like I'm sort of, because I'm placing.
You're starting to understand why I felt the way I did.
Yeah, no, I do. I mean, the more I listen to you talking about it, I'm going, yeah, I can understand why you would be upset. I have to understand.
Because it's not just that they changed it. It's that it was already a show. It was already the perfect show to make. You didn't have to do anything.
That's why we didn't like Piranha.
What's Piranha? Oh, yeah.
Okay. No, seriously.
No, it's a good comparison.
It's a good comparison.
Because you're just doing normal again, but you're getting it wrong.
and
you're absolutely right. I hadn't thought about it that way.
Yeah,
totally
and
right. Also, and here's the final thing that they changed that really hurt the show. Although you, as just an audience member who had never not familiar with the game, never would understand why this is so pivotal for people. But here's the thing they did that like people are going to have a hard time forgiving them for. Almost no Goro Majima. And you might be saying, okay, who's Goro Majima? And that's a really good question, because if you just watch the show, you would probably forget Goro Majima. And the answer is he's the one with the eye patch.
Okay.
Remember the eye patch guy?
Yeah.
Now, so there is a trope in Japanese fiction, specifically martial arts fiction, but in a lot of fiction, right? Where there is a character who is the martial arts rival of the main character of the show, or comic, or movie, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And he is obsessed with one thing and one thing only, proving that he's tougher than the main character. Right? And that and if he can prove he's tougher than the main character, his life will have meaning. And generally this trope gets so extreme with how desperate he is to be, prove that he's tougher than the main character, that it ends up being pretty clear that this is just a sublimation of the fact that he's in love with the main character.
Okay.
So the character who serves that role in the Yakuza series is Goro Majima.
Okay.
The guy with the eye patch. Which is why fans like me were so excited by the scene where he tries to, intimidate Kazuma Kiryu, and Kazuma Kiryu in their first meeting in the mob headquarters, and Kazuma Kiryu is having none of it. That because we were all excited to see, okay, so they're going to start introducing this relationship, which, by the way, Goro Majima's in every game. He's a playable character in Yakuza 0, which his half of the story is about his part of the plot to steal the city, and also he's running a bar. It's a wonderful plot, and he's a wonderful character. So you can imagine that people were upset, and I definitely was, when he's basically not in the show, and the two of them never fight. Like, the guy who's literally like his role in the series is to be Kazuma Kiryu's rival, and the two of them never fight.
Oh dear. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
No.
so that was kind of a big deal for us who are giant fans of the series. Because the whole point of him is, he is literally just a psycho. He is the craziest Yakuza. And I mean, that is how he is used in the series, that he is the mad dog you send to just wreck things when all other, when all other options have been exhausted. You send Majima to just go be a madman, right? And that is his role, and he is wonderful.
Okay.
But
but what I see,
he never gets a fight scene with Kazuma Kiryu, because at a key moment in the story, he kidnaps Haruka, and the thing that when he gets introduced, he's pissed off because he has spent the past 10 years, right? Kazuma Kiryu, because they're in the same clan, they're in the same, Tojo clan, they never got to fight. And so he has had to spend the past 10 years being the strongest guy in the clan, and everyone saying to him, yeah, well, you're not Kazuma Kiryu.
Yeah.
Right. You might be the toughest guy in the clan right now, but there was the Dragon of Dojima. And,
wait till he gets back.
Wait till he gets out of jail. I mean, he's the only one. And so, like, a huge part of the plot is this character's glee that because Kazuma is out and he's a civilian now, he's finally going to get to fight him.
Yeah, and
he's been dreaming of it. He's been dreaming of this fight for a decade. And now he's finally going to be allowed to do it. And that is like a huge part of his character. And again, it reminds you of how scary Kazuma Kiryu is, because this unbelievably scary monster is only obsessed with proving himself to Kazuma Kiryu. And none of that is in the show. Like, not one tiny bit of that made it into the show.
No, I understand. So maybe he will show up in season two. How's that?
Yeah.
But I understand, because I'm thinking They only had 6 episodes. I'm sorry, but I mean,
I know,
you say
it's
you
tough.
can.
But the thing is, they tried to cram 2 games worth of stuff into those 6 episodes.
Yeah. And
I'm telling you, I've played Yakuza 0. They could have just made Yakuza 0 a TV show, and it would have been fantastic. This attempt to like do both games in a single thing and cutting out most of the story and most of the characters, I think was a problem. Oh, also, and here's the other part. First off, they could have made it 8 episodes, but whatever.
Yes.
The thing, yeah, maybe
they
it was
spent a lot of money doing
They
this.
did spend a lot of money.
It is
joyful watching it and seeing them recreate the locations from the game. That was very nice. But there's actually a plot element I forgot to mention, which is the chairman gets killed, and there's a big question, and they can't find his will because the will names the next chairman. And yeah, exactly. So there's a question of where's the will, where's the 10 billion, and since there's no will, the reason all the guys are so desperate to find the money is they're like, well, there's no will, so whoever finds all of the clan's money will be the person put in charge. So it turns the entire clan against itself, and they're all after him and Haruka. And it's honestly, it's a fantastic setup for a story, and you see how this could easily be turned into a TV show. And they find the will, and he is named Kazuma Kiryu, the next successor. Chairman of the as his successor, because he's been in jail for 10 years, so he knows he's the one person who couldn't possibly be involved with the government's attempt to corrupt the clan.
Yeah.
And so that's why he's named him the successor. And there's one other decent guy in the clan, and that's Terada, right? The one guy Kazama trusts, who's, a captain in the clan, right? Not a lieutenant, because he's got a couple of trusted lieutenants, but one guy of Kazama's rank, and that's Terada. And so Kazuma Kiryu, because, he's got to look after this little girl, and he's not going to, like, have her dad be a mobster, because look at what happened to him. He immediately retires, and he puts Terada in charge of the mob. But of course, this sets up a problem in season 2, because Terada, his whole thing was that he was absolutely the most reasonable guy, the most sober guy. He wasn't doing schemes. He just kept his head down and he did his job, and everyone respected him. But what we find out in season 2 is the reason he kept his head down and he did his job and he didn't draw any attention to himself is because he was a mole for the Korean mob. And so unknowingly, Kazuma Kiryu has put a Korean mobster in charge of the Yakuza. Which leads to some... No, and it leads to the plot of part 2.
Yeah.
Where Kazuma's love interest is a woman who's in the FBI. Well, their equivalent of the FBI. Whose parents were Korean mobsters that... Kazama had killed during the mob war against the Koreans in the late 1970s. So yeah, it's a wonderful. 2 is fantastic. In 3, it gets completely soap opera-y because Kazama's identical twin brother shows up, who was in the CIA. Who was in the CIA, and it's all about American influence.
Sylvester Stallone's triplets.
Yes,
okay,
exactly. Right.
Out of the clear blue.
And the entire story is about essentially, let's just say the main thrust, and it's way too complicated to get into, but he has finally severed all ties with the mob, right, after the events of 2, and he just moves to, he moves to Okinawa to start an orphanage to look after Haruka and a bunch of other kids. And so him having an orphanage full of kids is like a continuing thing for the rest of the series.
There's always some man who feels guilty.
Well, yeah. And exactly, right?
Yeah. And therefore is taking care of the children.
Yeah. And so 3 is largely about, if it's about a single thing, it's about what America did to Okinawa, because that's where all the military bases are. Right. Basically, after after the Second World War, they set up military bases in Japan, and essentially the agreement was,
they also
we'll just
bombed
take
it
Okinawa.
out, remember?
Well, yeah, no, they completely bombed the country, but they wanted to stay indefinitely, right? At the end of the war, the agreement was, we're going to stay indefinitely, and you're going to give us a bunch of land to be military bases, and that is what happened to Okinawa, which had always had its problems and didn't want to be governed by mainland Japan. Mainland Japan was like, great, here's this troublesome province. We'll just give the troublesome province to America, and that solves two problems at once. We don't have America stealing land in mainland Japan, and we don't like the Okinawans anyway. And so the whole plot of the game is about the political wrangling to do with that, right? And how that has affected people 60 years later. Like what it's been like for 3 generations of people to grow up effectively under low-key American rule, even though they're Japanese. It's a very interesting series, is my point. So yeah. And listening to you talk about it, I see that it works as a drama.
Yeah.
But the tragedy, I think I've made it clear to you that the tragedy for me is, I think that the original would have worked better as a drama.
Well, it might have, and I really can't weigh in on it. Like I'm sitting listening to you, and I can see how that would work.
Yeah,
but it wouldn't. It's like the whole.
It's
thing,
a very different show.
It's a very, very different show. Like in other words, this one has got some of the main characters and some of the main structure, but it has moved quite far away for whatever reason from and for who knows what the reasons are, right?
Yeah.
Like okay, so you made the father, the orphanage father,
not being the mob, but still connected, and you made it so instead of just being the toughest guy in the mob, Kazuma Kiryu was trying to copy the toughest guy in the mob, and there's a twist that it turns out to be his dad.
Father.
Yeah. It's they've added a lot of stuff, and I don't see any, and this is the big difference I can say, because with the Halo show, I understand why people were upset, but there's any number of things that in the Halo show that I can point to say this is better storytelling than the original had. Whereas, and this is me being too harsh, and I apologize in advance because I know you liked this show, I can't point to anything about the TV show where I can say, well, that was a better storytelling choice.
Okay.
Then even Kazuma Kiryu has less of a motivation for taking the fall for Akira if Akira's sister's already dead. Because you can say, well, this is ultimately his responsibility because he's the one who wanted to be in the mob, except Akira, the whole thing that got them involved in this in the first place was Akira's idea. The heist was Akira's idea. Akira wanted to join the mob just as much. Everything that happened with his sister, Akira's the one who got scammed by the mob, and then Akira killed the boss to get revenge for getting scammed by the mob and his sister dying. There's no reason Akira shouldn't be the one to go to jail. Whereas if his sister's still alive and all the stuff about the mob screwing over his sister and leading to her to die happens after Kazuma Kiryu has already sacrificed himself, it makes more sense emotionally and logically. And Akira's betrayal, like realizing he screwed up his best friend's life for nothing, makes it all the more reason for him to go evil. So I'm just saying, even like the stuff like that they changed is more impactful in the original.
Okay, yeah. Well,
and you can see how, and the biggest thing for me is, instead of Akira just telling Kazuma Kiryu, right, about what happened with their dad, it's much more impactful if it's a deathbed confession by the father.
Yeah, well, of course.
You know, it's much more emotionally resonant. And I'll say, you can get kind of close to it with Akira, but I think that there are not places, you say you almost tear up. I do tear up when I watch the scene where Kazama confesses that he killed the parents. I do tear up in the game when Akira is like begging Kazuma Kiryu for forgiveness because he screwed everything up, right? Like, it's more emotionally powerful.
Well, I suspect, though, that you're still going to get something like that in the second
season. And
in the second season, because apparently the fan reaction in Japan is not as somebody says on Reddit. No. It was said that the reaction in Japan was actually a tad more negative than in the West.
Yeah, because the Western people don't have taste.
Well, no, and I think, it's also playing the game, right?
Yeah.
No,
but I think you're perfect proof of this. This is why I was so excited to do this episode, is because, and this is why I let you be the only one who talked for 50 minutes straight.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to color your opinion, and I wanted to know what it was like watching this for someone who had no real idea of the story of the series. Because this explains to me what the reaction is. Because I think universally, people who know the game feel like it's a poor adaptation because the game was already a perfect story. But people who don't play the game, which is the majority of people who
in the world,
think it's just fine. And I think what we're going to be left is people like me are just going to feel sad that the people who are watching the show didn't get the best possible version of the story that they could have. Also, I can't stress this enough. Like, it's gold. It's so weird for those of us who are fans of the series that he and Haruka, like, this is his daughter. Like, the main relationship in the entire series is the father-daughter relationship between him and Haruka, and they never interact in the show.
Well, except that he saves her. When he saves her.
They never talk. But it's like,
no,
after the whole show should be him looking out for her and the two of them hanging out.
No, they're setting up something different.
I know.
Sometimes you got to back off wanted. Just a little.
I know. I'm just saying this is what people wanted, because it's all of the iconic content of the series is the two of them, including what in many ways is the best thing to have ever happened in fiction. A scene where Haruka runs off because she hears, a dog whimpering. And then we see some street punks throwing rocks at a dog, and Kazuma Kiryu has to beat up a bunch of street punks and get his daughter a dog.
Yeah, well, that's okay. So what I would say is, so The Man from Nowhere, Goodfellas, and Vincenzo.
Yeah. And Vincenzo. If you want to use those as the touch point, I think that is not an unfair touch point.
Yeah. And what I would say is that, I'm assuming it's going to get a second season. Because I have a feeling that these actors across the board are going to become fan favorites.
It wouldn't
for people.
Shock me.
I also, because it's also, right? People watch Game of Thrones too. And they were very happy.
It's a bad adaptation.
It's a bad adaptation. And this one, because it is engaging. Like,
it is.
I really was so sad when Miho died. Like the sister died.
Oh, absolutely.
Because she was one of the more engaging characters.
She really is.
And
no, she's great.
And it was, so I was sad when she died because I wanted her to be there forever throughout the whole thing. But I would also say that there have to be a lot of people in the rest of the world that won't have played Yakuza.
And who can just enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah, because Yakuza is does it have an English translation?
Oh yeah, no, you can.
I did listen to it in English.
You can get all of them in English.
Yes, it was all in English in the background.
Now. Yeah, you can get all of them in English now, but mostly people play with subtitles for, I think, obvious reasons. And more importantly, there's going to be, and this is why Japanese game developers are better than Western game developers, because Western game developers, they only work project by project effectively, and they massively overhire for a project, and then they fire everybody, and then they try to sell another project, and then it's just a terrible way to run a business. Yeah. Whereas in Japan, with the best companies, not every company, there's still bad companies, but basically there's a company out there. It's called Yakuza Studio, Ryuga Gotoku Studio. It's the Japanese name of the game. Like a dragon, because that's how he lives his life. Like a dragon. And do you know what they do?
What?
Every year they make a video game. They're just constantly working on a video game. They've constantly got a bunch of video games in development. And so there's a game being written and a game being early coding, character designed, and a game already being coded, and a game, in basically full production, like in a game being completed. Because at different stages of a video game's life of development, you need different teams working on it. And so what these Western studios do is, well, they just hire those team people at every time, massively overhire. Where what these foreign studios do is they just like, okay, well, the people working on doing all the motion capture are working on one game, and the people doing early character design are working on the next game, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And the reason they do that way, because they do it that way,
yeah.
You for a American game, you're like, well, maybe once every 4 years we get an entry in a series. There's a Yakuza game every year. Every year there's a new Yakuza game. And sometimes it's a flashback to Kazuma Kiryu's equivalent in feudal Japan, right?
Okay.
And sometimes it's a zombie game. That's a fantasy what if zombie game. And sometimes it's a remake, and sometimes it's a prequel. And sometimes, you know what the next game is?
What?
Goro Majima goes to Hawaii and becomes a pirate. That's the next game in the series.
Oh, that's
because they make one every year, right?
Yeah.
And that is what the series is. Like, if it's this weird thing where it's like, if you're a fan of Last of Us games, well, they made 2 over the course of 6 years, and then like they're never going to make another one. If you're a fan of the Yakuza games, there's a new Yakuza game every year. It's a great thing to be a fan of, and they're all great. Like, there's never been a bad Yakuza game. It's crazy, but it's true. Like, there's never been a bad one. So yeah, I'm trying to see the bright side like you do, and hopefully, like, because the place they end season 1 means they cannot possibly adapt game 2, because like Haruka's not an orphan. All of the characters who were, Akira's probably still alive. Like, at the end of Yakuza 1, the decks have been completely cleared, right? Every single character but the main character and his new adopted daughter is dead, so they could go anywhere they want with the second game. Whereas with this thing, the second season is just going to be a continuation of all of these characters' stories. But because all of these characters are dead in the original, it can't be the same story. They have to do a completely new story next year. And what I hope most of all is that, taken away from my expectation that they adapt to the games, because now they can't, that they managed to win me over just with good storytelling. Because this year, I'm going to admit it, my view on the game is blinkered by my expectations and my belief that they could have just adapted the game and it would have been perfect. Here, they didn't do that. The bridge has been crossed, right? They have, the bridge has been burned. I said crossed, like I'm talking about the Rubicon. The bridge has been burned. They are not adapting the game. So I want to see if, telling their own story, they can do something incredible next year. And
well,
I honestly, I hope they can.
Yeah.
I hope they can.
And happiness is incredible.
Yeah. I hope they manage to do something incredible next year, but I'm still going to be sad that we're never going to get, a straight adaptation of the Yakuza story, because it's such a good story.
Yeah. Anyway. No, and that's the only way. That's the only way we've spent a couple of hours actually.
We have, because because it's not exaggerating to say that this is my favorite thing.
Series.
People might think, oh, well, he's the Dark Pictures guy, and I am. But it's like, the Dark Pictures, I only think one of those is a perfect story. They're all good, and I love the series, and I love the meta series about, what's going on with the curator and blah, blah, blah. And I'm hugely engaged in that. But the difference is, every Yakuza is an incredible story. Like, every Yakuza is one of my favorite video game stories ever. The fifth one of the 4, and again, it goes back, so it's one of the 5 playable characters. Like, here's how insane the story gets. After 3, you start having multiple protagonists for the next 2 up until 6. Right? And 6 is, again, just Kazuma Kiryu's story. But in 4 and 5, you've got one of the new main characters is the guy who got all of the money when the 10 billion yen exploded, and he's a fantastic main character of the series. I hope they managed to get him in, even though, you know, they can't do his origin story anymore. I hope they managed to get him in somehow. But then there's a criminal, right? A criminal out of jail, right? Who is an old friend of Goro Majima, right? Who breaks out of prison and is a delightful character. And Aiko's camo jacket is a reference to him as a character, because that's his famous outfit. All right, so there you go. So who knows how they'll put him in there. But the best part is there is a character in here as part of the story who is a former professional baseball player who was thrown out in a cheating scandal, and he's one of the main characters, and now works as a writer reviewing essentially the quote-unquote massage parlors and sex workers of the town they live in. And he gets involved with this unbelievably elaborate plot, and in the same time, in the same story, Haruka's one of the main playable characters, because she's trying to become a pop star. Like, this is the kind of crazy places this series goes. And there was a part of me when I heard that they were going to be adapting the series and trying to do it better, I was so excited, because all of these stories I love, I was going to see. And the way the first season ends, I really do worry that I'm never going to see any of these stories adapted.
Well, I mean, that Haruka becoming a pop star, I can see that being, because there's going to be so much. They could do that. There could be so much corruption and everything else. And she could be so in such danger and everything. Like, I could see that becoming one season. Just that storyline.
And her manager, right? The woman in the industry who like decides to try and move her forward ends up being Goro Majima's ex-fiance, and there's a whole plot around that. I mean, it's a magnificent game. Yakuza 5 is one of the high points of the series. It honestly might be my favorite game in the series, but I'm not going to waste any more time talking about Yakuza games. We were here to talk about the show. We talked about the show. Thank you for doing this. For now, though, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, if there's any profiling related fiction you'd like us to check out, drop us a line at profilingcriminalminds@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. If you're listening on an app or podcatcher, please rate and review and subscribe, because that's how people find out about the show. Okay. We're going to be back here next week for our last comment, I think probably forever, on Those Who Kill. Let's just say we weren't huge fans of the remake, the Danish remake. The American remake, we have complicated feelings about. We both love and hate it in equal measure.
Yes.
But that is a story for another time. A time you've already heard. We'll see you back here for that. But until then, I'll say that's right. Au revoir.
And have a good week.